Nintendo is already making plans for 2025 and some 3DS GameCube ports heading to Switch in the latest rumor mill. So good morning, Mario, and good morning, Switch fans. Hope you're all doing fantastic out there, enjoying your week because it's almost June. It's almost June, and while the year is flying by, and in some ways that's a bit spooky, it's great because we are reaching the point where Nintendo, they have to talk. Their backs are almost up against a wall, and it's time for them to deliver. We know that they're going to be delivering a June Direct, and that could happen as soon as 6 days, but probably closer to the middle of the month after Jeff Keighley's Summer Games Fest Bonanza. That is my prediction. But today, let's not focus on the future. Let's focus on right now, which inherently is also about the future. What's going on, everybody? It's Zach from SwitchForce. Thanks so much for being here. Nintendo confirmed that they're opening their second Nintendo store in the US, this time on the West Coast in San Francisco Union Square in 2025. Now, we know Nintendo has stores all over Asia, as well as a big Nintendo store in New York, and I think it's a really fun thing to visit at least once in your life. Getting to go to an official store for Nintendo, buy Nintendo with a whole bunch of awesome merch and exclusive merch, very, very nifty. Plus, they have all sorts of photo ops and things of that sort. This one, could it be tied to something big in 2025? Before you assume that this is tied to the Switch 2 and maybe they want another store to hype up the launch of their new console, let me also remind you that Nintendo is opening a theme park in 2025 in Orlando. So Nintendo is opening a lot of things next year as they look to expand their presence in the US with now Super Nintendo World at Universal Studios Hollywood. Next year, Super Nintendo World, but bigger with DK Land at Universal Studios Orlando. And now a store in New York and a store in San Francisco. While I do fully believe the next Switch is due early next year, I don't think that this store has anything to do with it. It just seems like Nintendo is really trying to expand into every area they possibly can. Movies, toys, short films, Netflix, games, stores, theme parks, etc. It makes a ton of sense. It's awesome for us Nintendo fans, and I think it's really good for the world at large because Nintendo stuff thus far has been very high quality. That's one thing that I'm very impressed by. A lot of companies look to milk their IP and milk their characters, but often with lackluster results. Nintendo, on the other hand, delivered a pretty sick Mario Bros. Movie, delivered an awesomely immersive Super Nintendo World, and are looking to just expand upon that, build them even bigger and better, and then eventually give us a Legend of Zelda live-action movie that could send everything the opposite direction or blow us away even more. If they can get that movie right, if they can get these theme parks right, if they can get these stores right, they are going to continue their takeover, and that does work out perfectly with a new console, but I don't think this store has anything to do with a new console. What I did think had to do with a new console was Nintendo acquiring Shiver Entertainment. If you remember, they picked up a new studio, one that is infamous for their great Switch ports, games like Mortal Kombat 1 and Hogwarts Legacy most recently, turning out awesome on the Switch for the capacity that the hardware has. Now, an interesting theory and set of rumors has been tossed out by Brazil, the leaker who first reported on the Switch 2's delay, which, as each day passes, seems more and more 100% legit. And he's saying that maybe Nintendo didn't acquire Shiver to ensure a bunch of quality Switch 2 ports. Maybe Nintendo acquired Shiver to continue the Switch 1 ports. Now that to me is just so bananas, but in a weird way it makes sense for Nintendo. I thought that Shiver was going to be ones to help guide the efforts forward for third-party support on Nintendo Switch 2 and to go to companies like, Ubisoft or Activision and say, hey, we will assist you to bring your big franchises to the Switch 2. But maybe Nintendo knows, given how they've developed this new console, that it's actually going to be relatively easy to port to, and they don't need internal support for that. But maybe what they do need internal support for is continuing the life cycle of Switch 1. How many third parties are going to want to release Switch 1 games in 2025 and beyond? Maybe not very many. At least not very many newer titles. Like we've seen past consoles get the infamous Just Dance yearly release or the FIFA yearly release, but what about big new games? What about ones that would excite Switch 1 fans to play on the go? Brazil insinuates that maybe Nintendo picked up Shiver to make Switch 1 ports last even longer and to bring quality titles to the old platform. He says there's 2 games he knows about that are releasing after April 2025 that are coming to the Switch 1, not the Switch 2. And he believes that not only will we get games in April 2025 for Switch 1, but beyond, and he thinks Nintendo will want to feed that audience for quite some time. Now that by itself is very interesting, that Shiver may not be for the future, but for the past. And in some ways, like, you can't fault Nintendo. There's 140 million Switch out there. Of course they want to support it. And if you're someone that doesn't plan on upgrading or don't think you can upgrade right away, well, this is great news. Nintendo will continue to support you, not just in first-party games, which I imagine will have a handful of cross-gen titles, but also in third-party games, and maybe ones that, would never be able to come to Switch 1 without Shiver coming on board internally. So that, it could be good news, but it also means, like, less games for Switch 2, or does it? Because maybe Nintendo will just have, like, say, Ubisoft do the Switch 2 version, and then Shiver will help downgrade to a Switch 1 version. There's a world where this actually doubles the releases we're getting, or at least doubles the opportunity for said releases. But what makes things even more interesting is Brazil insinuates that one of these two games he knows about is a 3DS port, and one is a GameCube port, both coming to Switch 1 after April 2025. Your guess is as good as mine for what games Nintendo would want to bring from the GameCube and 3DS eras to Nintendo Switch all this late in the life cycle. I feel like they've utilized quite a few good 3DS games, maybe even some of the best GameCube games, so what else could there be? Does Super Smash Bros. Melee sound like an interesting inclusion for the Switch library if we're a long ways between and before the next Smash Bros. Release? On the 3DS side, I know everybody keeps predicting Kid Icarus Uprising, but is that a game that you release after the Switch 2 drops? Or do you want to give Switch Kid Icarus more of a chance to thrive and maybe come back as a franchise, so you release it before the Switch 2 drops? Or is this something smaller or more tied to a third party? We do not know. And I don't even want to give you my best guess because there's so many 3DS games and so many GameCube games, and it doesn't really sound like there's a lot of narrowing information out there. It's been rumored that Bandai Namco may be on the GameCube port, but Bandai Namco could be helping. Bandai Namco could have originally developed. I don't know. Bandai Namco does support Nintendo in a lot of ways. What 3DS game and what GameCube game do you think Nintendo would want to port to Switch 1 beyond the launch of Switch 2? To me, that tells me it's smaller titles, more niche titles, or more widely appealing titles. Like, I can see merits for both ways. You go niche because, like, hey, the time has passed, you don't need this to sell millions. Or you go very widespread and broad because you're just trying to cast as wide a net as possible and, grabbing families, younger players, etc. What games is Brazil talking about? And maybe more importantly, how do you feel about Nintendo continuing Switch 1 development and porting for quite a while, well beyond the launch of Switch 2? We've seen it happen with recent consoles as they evolve to their next-gen counterparts. Sony was, not too quick to let go of PS4, and maybe there's nothing wrong with Nintendo not letting go of Switch 1 either. My only concern is if it does impact the development of the Switch 2 games, because we have seen Microsoft struggle immensely with the Xbox Series S versions and then the Xbox Series X versions, and many a developer says that the Xbox Series S holds back development and makes it much harder to make a game work since it has to release on both. The silver lining here would be that since Nintendo has acquired Shiver, Shiver could be solely responsible for the Switch 1 version and take all the heat off the companies trying to develop the Switch 2 version. Nintendo says, hey, we'll just do it ourselves, don't worry about it, and maybe then that doesn't impact development in the same way that Microsoft has seen development impacted over on their side of things. I normally think it's a good idea to vault forward, but we're in an interesting situation where Nintendo's next console is described as an iteration of the Switch, and Nintendo does have a huge audience to cater to and to eventually try and transition over. I think Nintendo needs to carefully balance, like, making sure there are some Switch 2 exclusive games to really incentivize and reward those who drop $400 or $450 in the system, but also offer opportunities for Switch 1 players to still enjoy, to sell into that 140 million player install base, to make sure that third parties are getting good value out of their projects. If they bring them to Switch 2 and they can also get a Switch 1 version out of it, then they're probably more likely to continue on with Switch 2 ports. It's like a careful balancing act to ensure that you're future-proofing and really supporting the next console, but also getting the sales and the dollars you need to make sure there's no layoffs, no disappointments, no troubles that then leave your new system stranded. You got to make sure that you're catering to the old while also encouraging the new, and it's a very delicate, difficult balance that I think both Sony and Microsoft have struggled with in their own ways. Can Nintendo perfectly navigate this storm? Probably not perfectly, but I think there's so much emphasis and so much awareness on they have to do this right, especially after Wii U. They have to get this right, and one system's success does not guarantee the next. unless you execute smartly and with awareness for all the different players and audiences you're trying to cater to. I believe in Nintendo. I think they can do it. Let me know in the comments down below what you think the 3DS and GameCube ports are that Brazil knows about after April 2025, and how you feel about a Nintendo store in San Francisco. Is that closer to you? Will you be heading there? Now you got San Fran, New York. If you're in the middle of the country, kind of tough, but hopefully you can get to one of those coasts, because I do think it's worth going at least once. You can't shop online, you can't shop on eBay, you can't have a friend go, but as a lifelong Nintendo fan, it's pretty cool to take a picture there, say you've been there, and grab something as a memento. I enjoyed it a lot. But the theme parks are also great, and the theme parks have the best mugs in the world, I think. I literally think these are the best mugs in the world. Any brand, anything. And I think you guys are the best audience in the world. So thanks so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. And until next time, SwitchForce out.